For most of modern American history, work had a simple rule. If you wanted a good job, you had to go where the job was. That meant offices in New York, tech campuses in San Francisco, corporate headquarters in Chicago, financial districts in major cities, daily commutes, packed trains, traffic jams, and long hours spent sitting in cubicles or meeting rooms. Work was tied to a physical place. Then, almost overnight, that rule broke. Remote work changed America forever. What started as a temporary response to a global crisis became one of the most powerful economic and cultural transformations in modern history. It didn't just change where people work. It changed where they live, how they spend their time, how companies operate, and even how cities function. And the effects are still unfolding today. To understand how big this shift is, you have to remember what life looked like before remote work became mainstream. For decades, the American workplace revolved around the office. Companies believed productivity required supervision. Employees were expected to show up in person, often 5 days a week. Entire industries were built around proximity. Downtown business districts, commuter rail systems, parking garages, lunch spots, office towers. Cities grew because of work. People lived near their jobs or spent hours commuting to reach them. Location determined opportunity. If you wanted to work in tech, finance, media, or consulting, you had to live in a handful of expensive metropolitan areas. That system shaped everything: housing markets, transportation, migration patterns, and even family life. Then technology slowly started to loosen those constraints. The internet made communication instant. Cloud computing made collaboration possible from anywhere. Video calls replaced meetings. Digital tools replaced paperwork. Work became less physical and more digital. But even with all of that, most companies still resisted full remote work. The cultural mindset hadn't changed yet. Then came the turning point. In a matter of weeks, millions of workers were forced to leave offices and work from home. Entire companies shifted overnight. What many thought would be temporary became a long-term experiment in how work could function without physical offices. And something surprising happened. It worked. Productivity did not collapse the way many executives feared. In many cases, it stayed the same or even improved. Employees gained hours back every day by eliminating commutes. Companies saved money on office space. Workers gained flexibility they had never experienced before. And once people experienced that flexibility, expectations changed permanently. One of the biggest effects of remote work is migration. For the first time in modern history, millions of Americans were no longer tied to expensive cities for employment. People who once had to live in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Seattle suddenly had options. And they started moving. Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, North Carolina, and dozens of smaller cities saw huge population increases as remote workers relocated in search of lower costs and better quality of life. Someone earning the same salary could suddenly live in a larger home, pay lower taxes, and enjoy more space simply by changing zip codes. That shift alone reshaped America's housing market. Demand surged in affordable regions. Prices rose in previously overlooked cities. Entire neighborhoods were transformed as remote workers arrived with higher incomes from coastal companies. Meanwhile, big cities began to feel the impact. Some urban centers experienced population declines or slowed growth. Rental prices fluctuated. Office buildings started to empty. Downtown areas that once thrived on daily commuters saw reduced foot traffic. Restaurants, cafes, and retail businesses that depended on office workers had to adapt or shut down. The office itself also changed forever. Corporate real estate, once a symbol of business power, became less essential. Many companies reduced office space or shifted to hybrid models. Some adopted fully remote structures. Others reimagined offices as collaboration hubs rather than daily workspaces. The traditional 5-day commute began to disappear for many workers. And with it, one of the defining rhythms of American life started to fade. But remote work didn't just change geography, it changed time. Commuting hours were reclaimed. Work schedules became more flexible. People began structuring their days around productivity rather than location. Some worked earlier, some worked later. Some worked in short bursts between personal responsibilities. The strict separation between work life and home life began to blur. For some, that created freedom. For others, it created challenges. Without physical separation between office and home, many workers struggled with boundaries. Burnout, overwork, and constant connectivity became real concerns. The laptop followed people everywhere. Work could now happen at any time, which sometimes meant it never really stopped. This led to a new conversation in America: work-life balance in a remote world. Companies and employees began experimenting with hybrid models. Some returned to offices part-time. Others stayed fully remote. Many settled somewhere in between. There is still no universal answer. But one thing is clear, the old model is gone. Remote work also transformed talent competition. In the past, companies hired mostly within commuting distance of their offices. Now they can hire nationally or even globally. This dramatically expanded the talent pool. A company in California can hire an employee in Texas. A startup in New York can hire engineers in Tennessee. A marketing team can be spread across multiple states or countries. For workers, this increased opportunity. For companies, it increased competition. Now employees are no longer competing with people in their city. They are competing with people everywhere. At the same time, they also have access to jobs everywhere. It's a global labor market without physical borders. Education and skills have become more important than geography. This shift is also reshaping inequality in complex ways. Some workers benefited enormously, and especially those with high-demand digital skills. They gained flexibility, higher salaries, and access to more opportunities. Others struggled, especially jobs that cannot be done remotely, such as service work, healthcare, construction, and manufacturing. This created a divide between remote-capable and location-dependent workforces. And that divide is likely to grow as technology continues to advance. Remote work also changed family life and personal relationships. Some families moved closer to relatives. Others relocated to cheaper states. Parents gained more time at home without long commutes. Children spent more time with working parents. Daily routines became less rushed for many households. At the same time, social isolation increased for some workers who missed in-person interaction and office culture. The office was not just a place of work, and it was also a place of social connection. Remote work replaced that with digital communication, which is efficient but often less personal. Cities themselves are still adjusting to this new reality. Urban centers that relied heavily on office workers face long-term questions. If fewer people commute daily, what happens to downtown economies? What happens to commercial real estate? What happens to transportation systems designed for peak-hour traffic? Some cities are adapting by converting office buildings into housing, entertainment spaces, or mixed-use developments. Others are trying to bring workers back through incentives and redesigns. But the underlying trend remains. Work is no longer tied to place the way it once was, and that changes everything. It changes where people live. It changes how cities grow. It changes how companies compete. It changes how governments plan infrastructure. It even changes how people think about success. Because for many Americans, remote work unlocked something deeper than convenience. It unlocked choice. The ability to decide where to live based on lifestyle instead of necessity. Warm weather over cold winters, affordable housing over expensive rent, space over density, family over commute time, freedom over routine. That freedom is the true legacy of remote work. But it also comes with uncertainty. If work is no longer tied to location, cities must compete differently. Companies must manage distributed teams differently. Workers must navigate new expectations around productivity, communication, and boundaries. The entire structure of American work is still being rewritten in real time, and the full consequences are not yet known. What is clear, however, is this: remote work didn't just change jobs. It changed the map of America. It changed where people live. It changed how cities function. It changed how companies operate. And it changed what millions of Americans believe is possible for their lives. The office is no longer the center of the working world, and it is unlikely to ever fully return. Because once people experience freedom of location, flexibility of time, and control over their lifestyle, there is no going back.